Hello everyone, this is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today, oh my goodness, today is Phil Spector Day. Now, I really never knew that much about Phil Spector in my lifetime. Huge in the rock world, and I wasn't really a rock person, but I've learned a lot about him and about the crime which he was convicted of, and also I didn't know when I went into this how fascinating it was going to be as far as the forensic pathologists, their analyses about blood spatter pattern and suicide versus homicide and what really happened. Did she kill herself or did he kill her? Absolutely. And I'm going to do a crime reconstruction to show you something that I don't ever think has been shown. So I think you want to stay around for that. And let me welcome everybody who's in the chat room. My patrons from Patreon are in the chat room. And if you wonder why you can't be in the chat room, even though it says live up in the corner of the video, that's because this is a Patreon-only chat room, which means these are the folks who really support the channel and they're really interested in profiling and they don't cause trouble. Do you? Guys, do you cause trouble? Generally they don't. But if you're interested in being involved, click on the link below for Patreon and become involved. And if you don't want to do that, please do just subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with friends, and also hit the bell to remind yourself of when new stuff is coming in. And if you want to do a one-time support of the channel, there's a new little $ below, which is really helping. And some of the wonderful folks here, some of my patrons have already contributed to the channel that way as well. And so thank you guys so much. Anyway, let me welcome all of you and then I'll get on with it. Can you hear me? Well, okay. Benny says, can hear and see you. Thank you. What? Ann says, wait a minute. Hold on, Ann. Maybe it's, okay, I'm going to move my mic in just a wee bit. Just so you can, I don't want you not to hear me. Now, Ann, can you hear me? Joe is here. Molly is here. Let's see. Ann says she can hear me now. Okay, that's awesome. Red Rum is here. Who have I missed now? Carrie's here now. Okay, this is fantastic. And I'm going to miss somebody. I always do that. Ann, Molly, Benny, Joe. I think I've got everybody, but I'm not sure. And usually we have people joining as soon as they can get here to the show. So, not you, all good. Oh, okay, thank you. So you can see and hear me, so let's get on with it. Okay, and Lisa N is here as well. Oh my goodness, wait a minute, Lisa. What time is it for you? What time is it for you, Lisa? Because you are not on my time zone. And Lisa S is here too. Lisa S is on my time zone, but Lisa N, you must be like you must have insomnia or something, because you should be sleeping. But anyway, okay. All right, hold on. Gotta itch my nose. Okay, here we go. Let me tell you about this case, and it's 8 a.m., Lisa. Oh, she says late for me. Really? 8 a.m. is late? Oh. Yeah, 10 a.m. is about the time I get up, so I'm impressed. All right, wow. Okay, 8 a.m., you're up bright and early. Okay, here we go. What about this particular case? Phil Spector has died, so he is no longer with us. He can't say any more about this case, but this case has gone down as a conviction. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second trial, he was convicted. I'm going to talk at the end. I have a soapbox about adversarial court systems, like we have the civilian jury system, and the issue of paid experts. These are three big issues I have with our system, and I think this case represents those issues pretty well. Now, let me just read you this tiniest thing about Phil Spector in case you haven't a clue who this dude is. He was born in 1939. He died in 21. He was an American record producer and songwriter, best known for his innovative recording practices and entrepreneurship in the 1960s. I didn't know he produced as much as he did, but I mean, he was involved with the Beatles. He was involved with Tina Turner. He wrote songs that I didn't know he wrote. I'm like, oh my God, he wrote that song? He did some amazing things in the studio that people haven't even been able to replicate. Just phenomenal sound. He was, and I'm going to say this. I think he was a genius, an absolute genius. And I looked at this show. It's called The Agony and the Ecstasy of Phil Spector. And this is really a very interesting methodology that they used. They had him talking, and then they went to the trial. Him talking and went to the trial. So it was interesting to see the two aspects of him, which I think are kind of accurate. I think he had this brilliance where people really liked him and he was kind to them. He always considered himself a loner, and he thought he wasn't accepted, but a lot of people thought he was really interesting, and many women enjoyed being around him. And then he had this other side, and women said, oh my God, then if he drank it or something like that, he just changed on a dime, and he was really scary. And so I think we see that in this documentary. But also in this documentary, I just learned a lot about him, which I thought was quite fascinating, actually. And yeah, I think he was an absolute genius. And mind you, he thought he was an absolute genius too. He had a very high opinion of himself. But the one thing I really appreciated about him, which he did say, was he says, I don't have time to be depressed, and I don't have time for self-pity. I just keep going. And I think that was also very true of him. They even asked him in the show, they're like, well, what happens if you go to prison? And he goes, well, I guess Bubba becomes my wife. I mean, that's a pretty good attitude, I gotta say. I'm not saying he was happy to go to prison, but he at least had some sense of humor there, and he was very angry at the establishment, mind you. He talks a lot about the establishment. He has great anger against the establishment, which he thinks screwed him over in many, many ways, and during this trial he thinks they screwed him over. So he has that whole side. He gets very nasty and vicious when he's talking about that. So he's an interesting character. Let me put it that way. Okay, so now I want to talk just a little bit. Oh, everybody's coming in, or so I want to say. Florence is here now too. Oh my goodness, and it's getting busier. Okay, I want to talk about what I looked at in analyzing this case, just so you can sort of see where I'm coming from. This is a case which comes down to, in the trial, there was the issue of the circumstantial stuff and the personality stuff, the behavioral stuff, and then the forensics, all right? And the prosecution said he was a real piece of work and had all these issues, and everything came down to his behaviors. And vice versa. On the defense side, they said she had all kinds of issues. She was depressed and suicidal, blah, blah, blah. And so it all comes down to her having the problems. But the forensics then should clear this up. And that's a point that's made by the forensic pathologist, especially DiMaio, who was the defense's side of it. He said, you can talk all you want about the two people, but it's the forensics. And he's trying to tell us that the forensics are super objective and not subjective. And that is not true. And I really want to impress that upon people. And you'll see what I mean as I go through this. Because we often think DNA is absolute. And even DiMaio said DNA is not always perfect because it's just about statistics. And statistics aren't always perfect. But it's how you analyze things. And you can analyze incorrectly. And you can allow your own subjectivity to get in there for reasons of a number of sorts. And that was pointed out by the prosecution. I'll discuss that in a little bit under paid experts. But let me tell you first what I know about the field of forensic pathology and what I looked at. So first of all, I want to point out that this is Henry Lee. Everybody knows who Henry Lee is. He's all over television. I did read his book. I read his chapter on Phil Spector. He has a chapter in this book. It's on Kindle. And so I read his chapter. And interestingly enough, he pretty much just said what the defense said in this case. And he was very, very annoyed, essentially, with the media and the prosecution because he said... what he said. Oh, they said it's nothing more than a pay to say. That's what the defense used. High paid experts pay to say, and if you pay it, I'll say it. He was very angry about that. Okay, and you'll see why in a minute. So before I go into what exactly happened in this case, as far as the crime that went down, or the incident that went down, if it wasn't considered a crime, and then I'll go into the issues of the case. But first, I want to show you. Whoops, sorry, not that. Okay, first I want to show you DiMaio is the #1 expert for the defense. This is his most famous book. It's called Forensic Pathology, and you see down here, Vincent DiMaio, and I think that's his brother, Dominic DiMaio, but he's the one that kind of took off. Oh, the ugly pictures on the front. Okay, and I want to point out that I spent time on this book. I can pick out any page. Look at the page. You see that? You see how many things I circled? You'll see words on the side. You'll see I had questions there. I put question marks there. I have issues with it. I can literally pull up any page. Oh, I can't show that page. That says the private parts of people on it. Oh, that I can't show that page. There's a lot of unpleasant pictures in here. Well, here's another one. See, you'll see in any place in this book, literally every page. I've read the entire book from front to back without question. Circling things, questioning things, and so I'm very familiar with his work. Very familiar. Okay, what's interesting about this? He's talking about gunshots in this case, and there's nothing about guns in this book at all, which I thought was really weird. But anyway, and he does have a second book, and that is Gunshot Wounds. Okay, and it says Vincent DiMaio, which I also own, and don't have quite as much circle things here. But what's interesting is he doesn't have any discussion of gunshots into the mouth, which is what happened in this case. It's called intraoral. It's not even in this book, and yet he's talking about that. So it's very interesting to me how you can write. And by the way, all the stuff in his books is excellent. I mean, excellent. I always say I don't agree with everything. Sometimes I read, but I find his stuff, that's a recommended reading. I would recommend to anybody going into a field like this. And so he wrote this, and it's very good, but there's nothing about people being shot in the mouth. Okay. And then we have Spitz was also involved, I think, on the defense team. Yes, I have Spitz's book. This is called Medical Legal Investigation of Death. He does have stuff on gunshot wounds in here, but again, intraoral, almost nada, literally almost nothing. And then I also have blood stain pattern analysis, which has to do with what happened to the blood spatter patterns in this case. And this is just a really good book that I've always particularly liked. It's by a guy named Tom Bevel, and it's by Ross Gardner. Okay, these are some great books. Okay, so anyway, so I just want you to know I've read stuff, been there, done that. Now, let's go to the case, so I don't keep you from understanding this case any longer. All right, okay, now, what happened in this particular case? Okay. So we have these two people, and they met up one night. They did. They met up. And they met up in a bar, and she was working there. And let me tell you just a speck about her, because I think she gets kind of a raw deal in that we don't talk about. Oops, sorry about that. We don't talk about the victim enough in this case. Let me find a picture of her. A picture of her. There she is. All right. Very lovely lady. I do have it behind me anyway. But lovely lady, Lana Clarkson. They call her a B actress, which, it's kind of an insult. She worked in many, many movies. She did modeling. She did advertising. She is quite a tall lady, but very extremely attractive. She's in her 40s now. Still very attractive. But, work is hard to get in Hollywood. Very hard, especially when you're getting older and you haven't hit let's put it this way: if you're not a top actress in your 40s, you still have to fight to get roles. A waitress in a restaurant, or a school teacher or something. And if you're not super well known to the point of you're just a household name, you get a lot of work, but it's just not regular, and you may not get paid as well as people think you get paid. So she was struggling. She was definitely struggling. So she took this job at this restaurant bar, and she was working there. It was like she was just beginning her job there, actually. And he rolled in that night. He'd been already 2 other places. He'd been drinking, and he started talking to her, and somebody told her who he was if she didn't know. And then he said, "Why don't you come with me?" And eventually, yeah, she did. And she ended up at his home. Okay? And his home is known as, let's see if I can figure out where I just put this. Okay, there's a tremendous amount of information on this case, and of course I always lose everything, so. where, hold on one second. Let me pull up the murder part, or shall I not say murder? He was convicted of that, but we're gonna examine that whole issue. Oh, come on now. Okay, here we go. All right. So his where he lived in Alhambra, California, and this is the place he lived in. By the way, it's for sale. I saw it's for sale. I don't know if somebody bought it already, but it's for sale for $5.5 million. So it's a big place. Look at that place. I mean, that's a really big home, and actually very beautiful inside. Pretty good taste and stuff. So if you want to buy a house, there it is. And I have a couple more views of it here, because it's quite something. And I think this is, one might wonder why she went back with him, because she just met him that night. This is this little quick sex thing going on here. But this is another view of the house, and you can see the drive. Well, that's where all the limos come in and all that, who come to see him. Well, he has a huge garage. Look at over on the left, and this is the other side of the house. If you were just viewing it from, I don't even know if that's the front or the back, but it's considered the front of the house. And that area behind the house, the circular part, is considered the back. And that is where they came in that night. So, they rolled in there and they went into the house. Okay. Why did she go with him? Well, he's Phil Spector, and he's rich as crap, and he controls a huge industry. I mean, not controls, but he's big. He's a music producer. Huge, music producer in the industry. You got a woman who's in her 40s, very attractive, still working, but life is tough. And here comes Mr. Multimillionaire. Maybe he can get you somewhere. And people don't want to believe it, but the casting couch is very prevalent in Hollywood. And I was in Hollywood for a year, so I'm familiar with the casting couch. And I didn't go for it, by the way, and I also didn't succeed in Hollywood. But what happens is you don't have to say anything out loud. It's not like Phil Spector said, look, babes, if you sleep with me tonight, I might help you out. It's not like they say that, but it's like, I met this mega famous guy with mega money who's hugely influential. If I just go back with him and maybe hang out with him, have a little, I give up a little bit of something. Maybe it'll help me out. Maybe it will. So she went with him, and she spent 2 hours in his house. And from what I can see, as far as the house went, I tend to believe that they drank in the house, and I tend to believe there was some sex involved, some sorts of sex involved. And so then she went supposedly to leave. And this is where everything goes bizarre. So the limo driver is waiting out here. He's out here waiting to take her home when they're finished with whatever they're doing. So he's just waiting around. But she does not come out. What happens is Phil Spector comes out. First he hears a shot. He hears a sound, actually. He's standing in a lot, and he's like, what did I just hear? This boom, and he's like, what was that? And when you hear a gunshot, you often don't realize what you've heard. That's just the way it works. So you might be confused over what you heard. He's like, oh, what was that? And then the next thing he sees is Phil Spector comes out of the house. Okay? Now, Phil Spector comes out of the house, and hold on one second. I'm trying to find my spot where I was. Oh, let me not have that problem again. Oh yeah, here we go. So he's outside, and Phil Spector comes out. He comes out with a gun in his hand. He has blood on his hand. This is according to the limo driver. Now this is a statement from the limo driver. And he says, it's hard to read there, I think I killed somebody. There we go. He told me, this is the limo driver, he told me, I think I killed somebody. Now, one of the things the defense tried to do to tear this apart was to say that the limo driver was from Brazil, and therefore he didn't speak very good English, and he must have misunderstood what was said by Phil Spector. Now, what's interesting is he was a substitute driver, so he didn't have he wasn't like Phil Spector's personal limo driver who might have his back. This was just a guy who was there. And what happened when Phil Spector came out and said, I think I killed somebody, he freaked out. And he freaked out, and he first, he didn't know the address where he was at. He was trying to call, I think he tried to call his office or something first to let them know something had happened. Then he called the police quite quickly because he saw the address on, I think, outside. And he called the police and said, come, there's something, my boss just said he killed somebody. Okay? He said that, he said, my boss said he killed somebody. So they tried to tear him apart in court, saying that, he was from Brazil, and he spoke Portuguese, and therefore, but it turned out that he'd studied English since he was 11 years old. And so he grew up studying English, and he'd been in the country quite a long time. And let me tell you, if you've been in the country that long, and you work, and let's face it, let's be realistic. Portuguese is not one of the most popular second languages in this country. It would be Spanish. And it's close to Portuguese, but it's not. So it's not like he's heavily in a huge community of people speaking Portuguese. So, and he's working for a lot of people who speak English, and he's got to speak to his customers and all of that. So apparently he spoke English pretty well. And I'm pretty sure when he saw a guy come out of a house with a gun in his hand and blood on him and say, I think I killed somebody, that's what he believed he heard, and the likelihood that was said was pretty high. Okay, so the police show up and they're thinking, wow, this is interesting. So anyway, they take him into custody. Okay, Phil Spector. And interesting enough, in the beginning, let me find what he told the police in the beginning. Okay, hold on a second. I've got to locate it. Okay, here we go. So after they took him in, okay, so they bring him in, and he tells them. So what happened was, let me show you the crime scene here. And I'm not going to show you, by the way, I'm very cautious on the pictures in this case. I'm not going to show you any pictures of the victim because it is fairly unpleasant, shall we say. Okay, but I just want to show this. Okay, so here's the limo dude. He's out here. You can see her lying here. She's in the foyer. So she's interesting enough got her purse. It's a kind of a long hand, like a cloth handle strap, I guess a cloth strap, hanging on her shoulder, which is interesting because usually when you put a purse on your shoulder, it means you're leaving, and this is very important in this whole story. It would mean she's leaving. She's dressed. First of all, she's messing around with Phil, and doing some sex stuff. She wasn't doing that any longer because she had her dress on, she had her stockings on, she had her shoes on, and a purse over her shoulder. So you think at that point she is leaving the house. She should be walking here. She should be about here. She should be leaving the house to get in the car. but she doesn't get past this point. She ends up dead. Okay, and this is just us showing, this is kind of the foyer area, and the police are working down there. So, anyway, Spector tells the officers, searching his estate, this is the most devastating thing I've ever seen in my life. I think that's a true statement. He had a woman dead in his foyer for whatever reasons and causes, and blood on her and not moving, and I'm sure it was the most devastating thing he'd ever seen. Okay, so at first the music producer offered to tell police what happened according to the grand jury transcript. Just ask me and I'll tell you. I'm not Robert Blake. Somebody wants me to do a show on Robert Blake. I think that's kind of funny. And I will. I'm not Robert Blake, who was accused of killing his wife. In other words, a theoretical premeditated murder. The gun went off accidentally. He made that statement. She, the victim, works at the House of Blues. It was a mistake. Spector said, I don't know how it happened. They also testified that the police officer Beatrice Rodriguez, testified before the grand jury, and she said, Spector said, what's wrong with you guys? What are you doing? I didn't mean to shoot her. It was an accident. And so then he started getting very upset. And then once he got behind bars, he started changing his story. And he started saying that she killed herself. But then he said, again, I'm sorry this happened. I don't know how it happened. Okay. So you have a confession right up front. And one of the most important things in cases is what somebody says in the moment. It's the freshest in their mind. They're panicked, and they're most likely to tell you the truth than later on after they've gotten to talk to their lawyers and come up with a better story. So in the beginning, he did say he killed her. It was an accident. Okay. Later on, then he said, I picked her up. She wanted to come back to my house. She was drunk and drinking. And his story then gets kind of peculiar. He says that he doesn't explain things in very good order, at least not what I could find. So he says that suddenly she suddenly has a gun, and she's going laughing and whatever about singing something, talking about, and then she pisses the gun and kills herself. He says, I don't know where she got the gun from. And we're going to get into that whole issue of where did that gun come from? So that's the basic story. And at that point, the police have arrested him. Now eventually it's going to go to trial. And this is where I think things really get interesting. So now we're at trial, and this is him during the trial. He looks pretty miserable for most of the trial. And this was something that got him a lot of publicity because he came with his hair like that one day. I just want to go and, what do you think? Does it suit me? I just had to do this picture because it's like, I don't think it really works for me. Maybe if I put my head back. Anyway, he got a lot of flack for that. And he says, it really wasn't as big as it looked. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, let me go back to a more serious thing. So we're at the trial now. Okay, we're at the trial. And now I want to point out what the evidence was. And let me stop just to check your comments out here because, okay. And a little different. Alec Baldwin said same thing, accident. Well, the difference was, it was an accident. Alec Baldwin, he wasn't trying to kill, the photographer. I mean, absolutely he wasn't trying to do that. The question was, did he have responsibility for making sure that a weapon that he pointed at somebody was not loaded and dangerous? And so there's a really weird thing in the Hollywood issue where if you're doing a lot of shows with guns, like, Westerns and so on, you hire people to do the job so that you don't have to do the job yourself. So you're supposed to be handed a weapon that is not functional. It's cold, essentially. And then you're supposed to be able to use it without worrying. Now, my problem with that has always been, a gun is a gun, a weapon is a weapon. And I own weapons, and I'm very, very strict about how one handles them. And so to me, you never point a weapon at anybody unless you personally have checked it, because you in the long run are responsible when you pull the trigger. But I think it was an accident. It would be a manslaughter charge of carelessness, and then the question is whose responsibility. But I say it comes down to him. I don't care what Hollywood has to say. I'm going to get to I'm going to get to this in just a minute. Spector had a history of pulling guns on women. Okay, I'm going to get to that indeed. Okay, so now let's go to that hair, though. Wow. Yeah, there's a reason he had this. I'll give him a little break on this. Apparently, he was in this horrific car accident and went through the windshield and almost died and had massive surgeries, and it was just a mess. And his head was like, so he had to wear wigs from that point on. So I think he played around a lot, trying to, amuse himself with the fact he was, damaged up here. So he covered himself. So yeah, so there's a lot of wig use there. Oh wait, hi Doreen. It's my grandson's fault for having a birthday. That's why I'm late. Yeah, it's his fault. I hope he had a nice birthday. Okay, so Gretchen's here also. Okay. Now, this was an interesting point. Spector didn't like women living, period. Okay, so now let's get to the evidence. I'm going to point out the issues with the two of them. Let me start out with that first before I go into actually all the evidence, because the behavioral issues played a part in this case, a really big part. Okay, so let's talk about the two persons involved in this. Now, I'm going to start with Phil. So he had a bit of a problem. He had some emotional problems. I absolutely believe he was a genius. And I'm one of these people that says, no matter what he did in his lifetime that was wrong, he also did contribute a lot that was right. I'm not saying that clears him up as a human being. I'm just simply saying we don't always have to throw out, great things that were accomplished because the person who accomplished them had issues. Because he had issues. He was so brilliant. He really was. He was freaking brilliant. And I enjoyed listening to a lot of what he had to say, although sometimes very egotistical, because he kept comparing himself to like Galileo and Michelangelo and maybe a little Wagner, maybe a little bit, connecting himself to people that are true geniuses. I'm not quite sure he reached that point, but still, he was brilliant in his time. He was, and he said this. This is a couple things he said. Let me point them out. So this, by the way, this is like here he is. He's got his great music career going, but he's also got this problem. I would try to tell all the groups we're doing something very important. They didn't know they were producing art that would change the world. I knew, and that way he was an artist, an absolute genius, crazy artist. But look at the second thing. I have devils inside that fight me, and I'm my own worst enemy. He did know he had a Jekyll and Hyde thing going, and he struggled with it, and you could see he had times when he was completely out of control, and so that's definitely true. Now, the other thing that happened was, as was pointed out, all right, yes, there were women that came to trial and said he threatened me with guns. Now, this is very interesting. He didn't only threaten women, he actually threatened, I think John Lennon one time, he went nuts on him too. So he had a lot of guns. As a matter of fact, he had, I think, 12 of them at the time that he was arrested. And he liked guns for some reason, and he liked to flail them around, and so he would throw them around at people and freak them out, and they're like, hey, I think Lennon said, like, hey, if you're going to shoot me, just do it, Stop doing this game. But also, 4 women appeared at the trial. I thought there was a 5th, but okay, at least 4 women. And they explained what he did. And what happened was, when they tried to leave, like they were ready to go, whether it was before sex because they didn't want it with him, or it was after sex because they were done with it, or whether they were just tired and wanted to go home, he had real issues about people leaving him. Even she tried to not go home with him in the beginning. She was like, I'm tired. He said, no, you have to go. He would get very insistent. And apparently he would grab a gun and threaten the women. If they left, he would kill them. So that was not something new. And the type of gun she was killed with was one of the women claimed it was exactly that same kind of gun that she was threatened with. So he had definitely these behaviors. And when the prosecution put together, I'm going to get to the actual physical evidence and the forensic evidence, but the behavioral evidence, we have a guy here who obviously has some kind of weird thing going on in his little brain, threatens women with guns. Then a woman comes home with him, ends up dead in his house, trying to leave like the others, and he walks out in front of his limo driver and says, with a gun with blood on his hand, and says, I think I killed somebody. I'm going to say the police thought he did it, and the prosecution have a good reason to think he did it. Now, then we get to the other side of the case. Now, the defense in court started really trashing her, and they really did. They really, oh man, they weren't very nice about her. And one of the things that concerned me was Vincent DiMaio, who is our forensic pathologist, he also being in court, right? He said that he started making kind of a condescending thing about her, that she, she's over the hill. She's over 40. She can't get the rolls anymore. She's just gone. She's on a downhill slide. And he was I'm like, that's not really the position of a forensic psychologist. And he actually went through a whole thing about her psychology. And I'm thinking, you're not a psychologist. You're a pathologist. Why are you giving your opinion on her mental state? I mean, that to me is outrageous. I don't go for that. Now, I'm a profiler, so theoretically I'm allowed to because I'm an all-encompassing analyst. But he is a very specific forensic pathologist. He should be looking at the cause of death, the manner, just there, the cause of death and things associated with that. But to start getting into all the other stuff in court, I think that's not his place. But anyway, he went there, and he started talking about how she was just an over-the-hill, and she was a mess. Now, they brought in a friend. And I kind of really wonder about this friend, because maybe I'm a little suspicious here, but I always wonder, because I've dealt with some defense attorneys, and they will go out and they will find people, and those people who come in to testify can testify for a number of different reasons. One, because they want to do the right thing. Two, because they want to be famous, and if they can go in court and be famous, they're thrilled about that and center of attention. Or three, somebody paid them something. Not saying that happened, but you wonder sometimes. So anyway, she comes to court, and she says, hold on, here it is. Okay. She says, okay, let me do this first. Okay, I want to do this one first. Hold on a second. There was supposedly these emails or something, or texts, I don't know what they were. Lana Clarkson, major withdrawals from pain pills, falling in and out of love, trying to stay sober, totally broke. Oi. So she was just expressing, she was in a tough situation in life. She had I think she had 2 wrists broken or something along the way, so she had a lot of pain. Obviously, she had a little bit of a drinking problem, and she wanted to find somebody, and she wasn't making enough money, so she was frustrated. Okay. And then she said, I have more serious addiction, like pain pills. Okay. There's nothing wrong with looking at her issues. Now, here's another one. This is a more interesting one. Lana Clarkson says to somebody, I am sorry not to telephone tonight, but this way you cannot hear my tears. I am truly at the end of this whole deal. I am going to tidy my affairs and chuck it, because it's really all too much for just one girl to bear anymore. Don't worry, not before I pay you back. Okay. So the fact she says she's going to chuck it, she wants to get her affairs in order, but not before paying back, that has a suicidal ring to it. Absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know when she wrote that. So when I see these things, and it's, and I'm not spending 500 hours tracking everything down, I'm not sure when they introduced that in a trial what date that was, because she could have said that a year ago, and so what? She's still around, right? Did she say that right before this happened? Supposedly, the very next week, she had a couple great gigs, and she had them on her chart, on her appointment book, and everything. She was like an advertising thing was happening, and she was joining something else, and she was very funny, by the way, and she did comedy. She wanted to be a stand-up, and so she had something going in that direction. So she was trying, and it didn't look like the next week she was planning to give up. So anyway, they bring in this friend, the best friend, and she's dead, so she can't say she's a best friend or she had a falling out with her, or whether her best friend just slept with him. Who knows? But anyway, this is what the best friend said. After repeating what she told a Los Angeles jury in 2007, she told the Daily Mail, of course, the Daily Mail, she's going to have to talk to them, because she wants a little more publicity. 2 days before she died, Lana called me and was crying her eyes out for an hour. She said, I'm going to get a blankety-blank gun and blow my blankety-blank brains out. I don't want to live anymore. And 2 days later, she's dead with a gunshot wound to the mouth. And then also, supposedly there's a former club promoter said that she had said once, they didn't say when, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live in this town. I want to end it. I can't take it anymore. I'm done, done, done. Okay. Did she really say those things? That's hearsay, in my opinion, because we don't know. We don't know if she said those things at all. So she goes to a friend, said she said those things, or maybe ex-friend, or I say, now, 2 days before this happened. So now what's interesting about this is she's broke. She's trying to get on her feet. She's got stuff coming up next week. But somehow she ran out and bought a gun and decided to go to a stranger's house and kill herself at the stranger's house? Really? Was that the plan? Seems a little bit extreme to me that in those 2 days, 48 hours, she managed to get, by the way, an unregistered gun. An unregistered gun. And most people do not know where to get a gun. I mean, usually you go to a gun shop and you you fill out the paperwork and you wait for it to clear and then you get your legal gun. And if you're going to kill yourself, you might as well go through the legal process because it doesn't matter. It will take a little longer, but it doesn't really matter. Where's she going to find an illegal gun? I mean, she's not exactly the type that would know. So within 48 hours, she suddenly manages to get some gun from someplace. And it's a snub-nosed revolver, too, which is kind of weird, kind of unusual, and okay. But somehow she managed to do that, and then she puts it in her purse, obviously, goes to work with it, and then she chooses to go to his house, but instead of going home and killing herself in private on her bed, which is what most people do, she's going to shoot herself in his house? When was the last time you ever heard of somebody wanting to commit suicide, went to some new person's house and killed themselves in their foyer? I mean, it's just kind of a weird story, you know what I mean? Kind of weird. So, yes, this is correct, Amanda. Even if she was suicidal, that would be a weird place and time to go through with it. Absolutely. Absolutely. It just like, what the heck? Yes, also, yes, she was waitressing. Why take a gun to work? Nah. Fix your mic. What's wrong with the mic? Something wrong with the mic? Why? Why, Ann? Tell me what the mic issue is. Somebody tell me if there's a problem hearing me, because that would be annoying. Anybody else having problems with my mic? I'm not getting a response. Somebody respond. Can you hear me clearly, and has anything been a problem? Tell her. Lisa, what? Oh, what? I don't know what's going on. Somebody clear this up. I can hear you well, but loud. Oh, it's too loud. Oh, interesting. It's funny because usually it's too soft. Okay, let me move my mic back. How's that? Is that too loud now? Is that too loud? Yes, it's still too loud. Distortion. Really? Oh, that's so weird. Because usually it's too quiet. Huh. Okay, I'm going to move it back. That's annoying. I hate when things go wrong because it just drives me crazy, but it's very loud. Okay, hold on a second. Let me see if I can pull sound down on it, which it isn't usually the problem. That's so funny. Usually I have the opposite problem. How's this? How's this? Is that better? Okay, is that better now? Huh. There's a delay. Oh, for God's... You know why there's a delay? Oh. Now we're having... You know what happened? My internet's down. So now my internet is down. Interesting. So I'm logged in, but my internet just went down. So I'm going to try to plug into the internet again and see if it comes back. Hold on 1 second, guys. I'm going to come out. I'm going to go out and press the button on the thing and then come back. Okay, let's see if this works. It's not here yet. I'm plugged into the internet and it's been working fine, and then it just cut out, and so I'm just on so all right, I'm hoping it comes back because I don't like being off of the, when you're supposed to say you get plug in so that you don't have these kind of problems, but I'm not seeing my Nah. I'm going to keep going and hope that this starts picking up, because I don't like to be on just Wi-Fi. When you're on Wi-Fi, you get all kinds of distortion and problems, and that may be what's happening. So I'm hoping that I'm plugged in. It's just failing. Gosh, I love live. It's annoying, so annoying. Especially when everything's going well and you're enjoying yourself, and I'm enjoying my people in the chat room, and then things just aren't working. It's still not there. I'm still... Pat, you're fine. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going. But I'm on Wi-Fi now, and I'm not sure that that's going to hold, and that's what bothers me. Because I don't know why it's not coming in. I'm going to talk for a little longer. I might have to do a double check on that, because I don't like being on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi means you just never know what happens, and it'll go really bad. Okay, so anyway... Let's go to the evidence of this case. So we know what we know now is that he's got issues, and she has supposed suicidal issues, but she went to work that night, and she went home with him, and she first tried to get away from going home with him, but apparently she did go home with him, so that wasn't too smart, I guess. And what was this comment I saw up here? Oh, see, Lisa says, I can hear me, but it's bad, huh? Very annoying. Wow, now I adjusted the mic and distorted the sound. Okay, I'm going to move the mic here. Just let me do one more check here to see if it's clear. How is it now? Can you hear and see me clearly now? Anybody? Just want to double check. I still am not plugged in, but I want to make sure you can at least hear me clearly. I've moved the mic closer. Okay, anyway, tell me if it's too loud again, but... I've turned it down a little, but I'm moving the mic closer. Everything is fine. Okay, I'm hoping, and I'm still not online. I'm finally plugged in. It readjusted itself, and now I'm plugged in. Okay, let's go to the good stuff, which is the crime scene reenactment and the issues of that. Okay, so what actually happened? Penny says yes, and you're even more pretty now. Well, that's good news. Was I like before? It's like, oh, I get so frustrated with that. And that's why people won't do live, because, you think everything's going well, because I know I'm looking at my screen, and my screen is always perfect. I don't hear and I don't see anything differently, so it's so frustrating. But anyway, I'm glad I'm back, but it just annoys me. So anyway, let's get to the evidence of this case. All right, so she's found inside the house, and she's lying in this chair, and I said, I'm not going to show you the crime scene photos. I'm going to tell you what all these things mean. So here she is. She's right here. She's lying. She's in a chair, sort of slumped like this. And her legs are stuck out, and her purse is still on her shoulder, which is interesting. And she's obviously dead. Now, I'm going to show you this. This is from a crime scene, but it's very minimal, so I'm hoping that doesn't get me demonetized. Probably will, but anyway. Okay, because I want to show you where the gun was. This is her left foot. The gun is lying there like that. It's kind of interesting because she's right-handed. So in theory, if she were shooting herself, she would be using her right hand like this. Oh, and I've got a prop for this to show. I wanted to show you some gun issues. Of course, you should never use a real gun, because then what happens with people who use real guns they think are not loaded. Alec Baldwin. So I would never do that. Well, I did have a wooden gun, just a wooden prop thing. But with YouTube, you just think that everything you do is going to be demonetized because you showed a picture of a gun, So I'm going to use this. So this is going to represent this weapon here, okay? So it's my banana. Anyway, and a very dead banana, so I don't think I'm eating this one. But anyway, and nobody make jokes about this, because I know where this is going. Anyway, this is going to be the gun, because the thing was in her mouth, so you're adults, don't do that. Go aside with that. Okay, so this is going to be representing the gun, okay? So she's supposedly right-handed. No, she is right-handed. And normally when people shoot themselves, the easier way is just to do this, okay? Sometimes why people do this is because they're more assured that they're not going to miss. In other words, if you do this, you could, slip off, or you could just knock off part of your head. They want to make sure they blow the brains out, essentially. So shotguns are usually in the mouth, and they pull the trigger sometimes with their toes, and then on the back of their head blows out. One of the things DiMaio said was that, women, kill themselves almost always with a gun. And I just find that weird, because that's not true. Men guns are taught for men who commit suicide, but not for women. They got all kinds of other things in there, like, overdosing, cutting their wrists, and things like that. And actually, guns are way down. So I don't even know where he came up with that statistic. He didn't prove it, he just said it. So anyway, she had this gun in her hand, and she was going to pull a trigger like this. She will be doing this and pulling the trigger. Now, generally speaking, your arm is still here. It's not, so when it goes, then the thing drops. Would it drop to the left side of her body? It seems unlikely. Okay, could happen, because one thing I tell people about crime scenes, you're seeing what happened afterwards. You're not seeing whether she was moving around, whether her arm was like this. This is what the forensic pathologists often don't tell you at a trial, because they only want you to believe one thing, not that there could be some other possibility of things happening. So that's not maybe what happened. So, but theoretically, the most likely place is to the right, and yet it's to the left. So DiMaio tried to fix that problem by saying she used her thumbs. That was one of the reasons. And so therefore, she stabilized it in the middle. So then it could have just dropped either way, like 50-50. All right. Okay. All right. So anyway, this is the gun. This is a snub-nosed revolver that was used in the commission of the crime. Okay. Now, what about that gun is so fascinating? All right. Now, there is a drawer in that room. She's in the foyer, and there is this table in there. And in that drawer is this. You see what's over there? Yeah. Okay. That's a holster. The holster was empty. You know what fits in the holster? That gun. That gun fits in the holster. So she's slumped in a chair right next to a table which has a gun in it. And the gun is missing from this holster, so where is that? Why would you have a holster in a drawer and not have a gun in it, right? So it looks like the gun came out of that holster and was used in this crime. Now, if she didn't bring her own gun, then you would have to say that she found the gun by herself. What? She was rifling through his stuff looking for money on the way out the door because she had her purse with her. So she's like, oh, let me look in here. Oh, look, a gun. Let me kill myself. Is that logical or likely? Could happen. Not very likely. But the belief is this is his gun. So this became a big thing in the defense and the prosecution. The prosecution saying there's no question in our minds that this was his gun. Regardless of how she ended up dead, it's still his gun. The defense is saying she brought her own gun. Now, turns out there were like 12 guns in the house of all sorts. And what they were trying to tell in the courtroom was, yes, there were those, but then it gets even more interesting. He apparently they were allowed to bring in 3 guns, and so they brought in 2 guns that were very similar to the gun that she used to kill herself. So let me show you what that was actually said. Okay, Clarkson was killed by a single bullet from a Colt Cobra. And these are the other similar guns he had. 4 rounds were still loaded in that handgun were plus P, which has been described by some authorities as an obscure type of ammunition. There were 11 other guns in the house, and some were loaded with the plus P, which, according to the prosecutors, proves the gun belonged to Spector, not Carlson. Oh, what a quinky-dink, you know what I mean? Total quinky-dink. You know, that the gun looks like the guns he has. There's a gun missing out of the holster. The gun that was used in the crime had a specific kind of ammunition, which is kind of rare, but somehow Lana, in the last 48 hours before she decided to go off with Spector and kill herself at his home, managed to get a gun like his guns and the exact same ammunition that he liked that was so rare. I mean, this is where you get past the point of saying this is a coincidence. You have to start believing that this gun, she did not bring this gun, that the gun came from the house. The gun was Spector's. And so the only reason she could have gotten hold of the gun would be she rifled through his drawers and got a hold of it. Or he took it out and left it on a table and said, have at it. But he doesn't say that happened. He said he doesn't know where the gun came from. So either he gave it to her or left it out for her, or he's lying, or she stole it. She found it in the foyer and decided to shoot herself before she left. I mean, could be that unique a circumstance. But the gun, I think, has pretty much been proven to come from his house. Now, the defense did try to come up with some other crazy things. So here's in the opening statement, a lawyer for Spector said DNA from the tops of the bullets loaded in the Colt Cobra, the part touched when loading a gun, match Clarkson's DNA and that a second unknown individual but not Spector. So the defense was trying to say that the way you'd put, you see where that circle around, where you take that ammo and you'd put it into the gun, load the gun, her DNA was there. Okay. But during the prosecution's case, a criminalist testified that Clarkson's DNA was actually found in an area that included the tips of the bullets. Prosecutors suggested the DNA was from spots of blood thrown from her mouth when the gun discharged. Okay, so now we have, again, 2 sides of the story. But, again, I find it extremely unlikely that in those 48 hours she bought a gun like the guns that Spector had and loaded those guns with the exact same ammo Spector had. So I'm going to say that DNA is not who's ever analyzing it is either not telling the truth or they're not very objective. So this is where I say you start getting questions about what the truth is on anything. Okay, so now I want to get to another issue in this. So Spector was seen, he was seen outside, the limo driver said he came outside, he had a gun, and he had blood on his hands. Well, we run into a number of blood problems, so DNA issues, blood spatter issues, and this is where blood spatter comes in, and blood in general comes in. There was a lot of blood on her, and mostly on this left side of her dress. She had all kinds of ooky stuff there, from that. Okay, now he was supposedly wearing this white top here. And what you see here, when you see those lines, that shows where there's blood spatter. However, you can't see it really very close with your eye because it's like more of a mist. So they actually had to use a microscope to see where all the blood came onto, like it goes. Let me show you a picture of that. Where's my picture of that? Okay, here it is. Okay, so essentially, I thought that was a better. It's over here. See where the gun is. So when she gets hit, then there's this mist that sort of comes out from that hits somebody who was in that area. Now, he originally claimed he was 8 foot away from her when she killed herself. So he was supposedly watching her kiss the gun, and then she shot herself, and he was 8 feet away. That's what he claims. And then the defense kind of pushes him up to 6 feet away, because 8 feet away is kind of, blood doesn't travel straight. It goes like this. Then it's misty, because we're talking about misty stuff coming out. So it's kind of light, and so it goes kind of like that. And if he's 8 feet away, it kind of doesn't hit him. So they've now moved him up to 6 feet away. And now, because the prosecution said he had to be 3 feet away to get this to happen, therefore he was the one holding the gun. And so now the defense is trying to push him back and saying, well, he's 6 feet away, could still hit him from 6 feet, but he obviously didn't have the gun in her mouth. She had the gun in her mouth, and he just got hit. Now, they will point out that he's only got some that blood stuff on this side of him and not on this side of him. And he's right-handed also. So they're claiming, let me get my banana, if he's putting that gun in her, that his right shoulder would be forward and the right side of him would get this, not the left side. It would be, if he's left-handed, that this would be true. Let me show you how this does. I'll show you in a minute how this is where people make up stuff that just simply shouldn't be made up by any forensic pathologist. Also, there was blood in his right pocket. And so the police didn't know whether he put the gun at some point into his pocket. And up in the bathroom, there was what they called a diaper full that had her blood on it. He claims he tried to revive her with something, Did he? Did he go get water and try to go like this? Because he didn't call 911. So was he trying to save her life? He didn't make a phone call and try to get an ambulance over. He had they said, what, like 10, 12 phones in the house? He didn't pick up one of his cell phones and call 911. He went outside and told his limo driver they thought he killed somebody, and the limo driver was the one that went and called for the police and the ambulance. He didn't. So are we to believe that the reason that this has got her blood on it and is damp is because he went and tried to revive her? Because it doesn't look like her face is washed. So why is there blood on this thing in the bathroom? And why is there blood in his pocket? And why is there anything on this? Okay, so now let me get to the explanation of how she could have been shot, okay? So we'll go to Vincent DiMaio, and he is their #1 expert in this particular case. And boy, were there some people upset about him. And I'll talk about that, the paid expert issue. He claimed this. He said that this is how she was shot. Now, shot through the mouth to this part of the head back here. Okay? So this way to here. So she held the gun, here's my banana, with two thumbs and did this. Now, the other reason why he says she held it with this way, watch, see where my, okay, let me hold this like this with one hand. Now, where is the back of my hand? It's away from what would come out, the back spatter. It's called back spatter. So you go bang, and you go like this. Well, then she's got some back spatter on her hand. If you're holding the gun like this, you don't get back spatter back here, do you? So what DiMaio is saying is she used two hands, and see what he's trying to do, I believe, which I find kind of funny because I find it a little hard to do it. He's trying to twist the back of the hand toward the front on both sides so that somehow it can hit here. I'd like to see that demonstrated because I'm not sure that has, so he's trying to do this and make it so that the back spatter could hit, trying to hit here as as she's pulling the trigger. I find that a little strange, and I'll explain why I think there's a simpler explanation for that. Okay, so he's saying that this is the trajectory here. So the gun goes in here, and it goes back toward here. Now, and he explains that he has a nice little, he has a little, looks like a plastic head, and he's showing how the gun is here, and it's going toward the back here. All right, now, here's where I think this is all garbage. Okay, first of all, most suicides, this is not what most suicides look like. This is garbage. And I don't understand. See, they're trying to explain why it's like this. And nobody asked the right questions at the trial, and I don't understand why they didn't. Okay, this is not your trajectory for a suicide. This is more homicidal. Homicides point straight into the person's mouth. Now, they will claim that what's called an intraoral gunshot is almost always suicide. And that's correct. It almost always is. But it isn't always. Okay? There's a couple reasons. There's people who put a gun in somebody's mouth and say, do what I say, I'm going to blow your brains out. That's happened. Sometimes somebody will come at somebody and they'll go, no! And then the person will end up shooting them in the mouth just because the mouth is open. But it's usually this way, straight on. Relatively straight on. Now, most suicides go like this. Let me show you how it goes. It really goes like this, up here. Goes from here to here. Because, you know the old saying, you want to blow your brains out. You don't think you're blowing your brains out this way because you're only going through your neck. What if you miss your darn brain? So you don't shoot that way. So what happens is you usually shoot up, like this, so that you put the gun in her, aiming toward the top, kind of like this part of your head, high up there, so that it blow your brains out. What's interesting about that when it happens is that your tongue doesn't usually get damaged in any way because you're above. You keep your tongue down because you don't want your tongue to go, that'd be stupid. So you're actually above your tongue and up toward the palate of your mouth. That's how you do a blow your brains out. That's not what I'm seeing here. This is much closer to homicidal. And what happens, and her tongue had bruising on it and also was slashed down here, which when you come in with a gun in somebody's mouth and you're pushing it at them, they try to stop the weapon with their tongue. Their tendency is not to go but to go and try to keep you from doing it. That's why the tongue gets damaged in a homicidal attack. And it comes out more the back of your head low, or even on your spine, that back here, than in your top of your head, because they're not aiming up. Now, DiMaio says this really silly thing, which one thing he says is, well, if Spector did this, she's in the chair, he'd have to be kneeling on the floor shooting up. Okay. First of all, this is stupid. First of all, we don't even know she was actually in the chair. She could have been standing ready to go, and that dude is shorter than her, so he could be pointing up slightly because she's shorter than him. He's shorter than her. So he's like a 5, I think it's like maybe 5 inches shorter than her. So he'd be actually shooting upward. So first of all, so that's nonsense. Secondly, I want to show you something if I can do it. Okay, so see my head like this? If I'm shot here right now, I'm going like this, right? But I can always put my head back slightly. And then when you shoot, you could be shooting slightly down, and you're going to end up with the same thing. You just take this guy's head. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, you take this guy's head here, and you go, you get the same shot, but your head can be in a number of positions. So you can actually be shooting down on somebody and get that same thing because, the head moves. So once you're shot, your head goes like that. It looks like it's going this way because your head was like this when you shot down. So that's all nonsense. I don't see this. This is suicidal. This is not suicidal. It's not. Generally speaking. There are times when people do things very quickly. She could have done it quickly with 2 hands and didn't pay any attention because she was crazy. It's possible. But it's also just as possible he pointed that gun at her. Now, let's talk about this thing about, his left shoulder thing, his left side is clean. Let's see, wait a minute. No, his right side is clean. It's his left side. This is his right side. Yeah, this is the one. He's right-handed, blood over here. Okay. First of all, you don't necessarily shoot somebody like this. You're not always going like that, or even like this. Sometimes you do this. You can go, come on now. And now your left side is the one that's forward. And your right side is back. Also, remember that thing about the back of her hands? If somebody is coming at you with a gun, and you're trying to protect yourself, you put your hands up, that's where the blood spatter goes on, the back of your hands, because you're trying to stop them. You're going like this. And also, you're raising your hand. So if she raises her hand while he's coming in, and let's say he's doing the left side thing instead, he's going like that, she raises her hand, she may block the blood from not getting on you. And it also may bounce off of her own hand right onto her chest. She's going like this, the blood coming out of that gun, the back spatter, is going to go right here. There's so many elements here that he definitely could have shot her, and from different positions, her hand in different positions, her blocking, she had some bruises on her body, he could have been pushing her, shoving her, and she's trying to do that, and she's got her purse on her shoulder, and she's trying to block things, and she gets blood on the back spatter, she blocks blood from getting on him, she gets the back spatter coming off of her, going straight down on her clothes. I'm going to say, I think the defense, the forensic pathology for the defense is full of crap. And I'm sorry, Dr. DiMaio, I'm sorry, Dr. What's my other guy name? I'm sorry, Dr. Spitz and Dr. Lee. All of you are saying this is what happened, and you have no proof this happened, and there were alternative explanations, which you didn't want to bother with. Why not? Why would you say there's only one thing that could happen? This is absolutely suicide. Why would you say that? Because it's not true. And I'll stand by that. And I'm not a forensic pathologist, but I can figure out that there's more than one way for her to end up with the blood where she had it, the blood where he had it. And here's one more thing, which I think is very interesting. This whole issue about the blood on this. Now, he came out of the house. They said that on that gun, she had some of her DNA, but none of his. Interesting, huh? But yet, the limo driver saw blood on his hand and a gun in his hand. Now, the prosecution believes he went back in and he wiped that gun down. Why wouldn't he do that? Think about this. She's got blood on the gun. He thinks his fingerprints are on the gun, or his DNA is on the gun. He has time. The guy's off calling the police. He's not calling the police. The limo driver's calling the police. He's got time here. He runs upstairs, and he gets a wet cloth. He wipes the gun off. And maybe holds something else against the gun so he doesn't put his hands back on it. He wipes it off. Now his fingerprint's on it. His DNA's not on it. He does that. He takes this back downstairs. He takes it back downstairs. You see this in every movie, and I'm sure Spector's seen a few movies too. You take that back downstairs, and then you take her hand. You can put blood back on it, and you can put her hand on it, and her DNA will then be on it, and then you just drop the gun on the floor. I mean, I don't know that that's happened, but they suspected he did something with that cleaning rag, that he wasn't cleaning her. There's no evidence of him cleaning her. So that he cleaned that gun off and put the gun back. He staged the crime scene. So I think that's very, very sort of obvious to me that it is most likely what happened. Now, I want to point out one other thing, that this is what, so I can find it now. This is what ticked off some people, and I totally agree with them, which is the issue of why did they say these things the way they said these things? Okay, let's see if I can find the statement. This was a great statement. Hold on one second. Trying to find it. Hold on. That's the one thing I knew I was going to forget here, or where I put it. Was this it? I know I have a version of it here. Okay. They asked DiMaio during this, and I'm going to, where is it? Hold on one second, folks. Specifically wanted to do this one, and now I'm not going to be able to find it. Where did I put it? The issue was about the heck. Oh, let me look at my pictures and see if I took copies of it. Oh, maybe I did. Oh, maybe that's where it is. Oh, okay, I found it. Hold on a second. I'm almost finding it. Okay, because this is really, really important, and this is what I really think is a massive issue. Oh, yes. Okay, here we go. This person wrote, DiMaio, Dr. DiMaio is a disgrace to his profession. Let me pull up Dr. DiMaio here. Again, love his books. Every defense attorney with an obvious guilty client can get DiMaio to testify for the defense. He testified, for example, for Scott Peterson, on the defense there. Above, you can see the reporters discussed, this is how Phil Spector, who was found guilty but would go from place to place threatening people with a gun until one day he actually shot somebody. DiMaio said no, Spector did not kill anyone. The victim shot herself. Okay? And then they talk about a few other things here. While this situation is particularly egregious, this is not the first time that Dr. DiMaio had testified as a paid gun for a defense attorney. All right, so now they're talking about, here they're talking about the Phil Spector trial. DiMaio, they thought that he tailored his testimony to favor Spector. Yes, isn't that what you're brought in to do? You're supposed to tailor your evidence, not just tell the truth. DiMaio defended his reliance on a German study of blood spatter in which a scientist shot calves to collect evidence on how far blood spatter could travel. Okay, so he said, okay, blood spatter can travel 6 to 8 feet because of this calf study. American studies cited by the prosecution involved experiments with sponges. So, everybody's got something they can point to. Jackson stressed that DiMaio had already been paid $26,000 by the Spector defense. And how much more might he get, the expert said? And so this guy answers, I don't know, the longer you keep talking. So the longer the trial is, the more money you make. You make money before the trial, you got, whatever you charged for reviewing everything and coming up with the correct answer for the defense, and then what you're going to say in court. Because they're going to go through what you're going to say in court. And they want to make sure you're saying what they want you to say in court. And if you tell them something else, you're going to get fired. I've been there. I've had defense people bring me in. They say, what do you think? And I tell them, and then they say goodbye. I've never, ever. So far, I've only had guilty clients for the defense. So every time I tell them the clients are guilty, they get rid of me. So this is what happens. That it says here, while DiMaio may have once been a useful force in his field and may have written a manual for medical examiners, it has become very obvious that he can be paid huge sums of money to falsify testimony. The license of DiMaio must be revoked so he cannot stand in the way of justice anymore. Well, he's not the only one. This is my problem with the expert, the whole adversarial system. The adversarial system, prosecution versus defense, is set up to be a war, not to find the truth, but to be a war. And you can bring in any warriors you like, and you can do any tricks you can get away with. So each side brings in experts, and the prosecution usually has less money, unless the defendant is some poor loser schmuck, and then he has no money, has to get a public defender. Then the public defender is not going to hire big, huge people like this. He's just going to basically just say whatever he says in court, and the prosecution will have the better experts. But they're not going to have this kind of better experts, because the defense team, for somebody like Spector, has millions of dollars to spend, or if your Innocence Project is behind. Also, this is great. You can get great publicity, and you can write books. So I'm not saying Dr. DiMaio is a bad guy. I'm not saying he's a hired gun, but I'm saying the whole adversarial system encourages hired guns. And it really upset me. When I first saw this trial, I remember seeing it, and kind of being appalled because his book is my Bible for forensic pathology. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And this is a long time ago, so I don't really remember what I thought back then. But when I reviewed the case now, I see what my problem is, that they're not telling the truth. I just gave you a bunch of examples with a banana, which can explain how things could have happened. And none of that was brought up by him in court, or anybody, or any of his compatriots, the other ones who also do the same things and want to support each other in doing this kind of work and getting paid this kind of money. It's a lot of money. And I find that incorrect. And on top of that, I talk about the adversarial system making it a war. Also, the media makes it a lot about showmanship and a lot about how famous you can get. I don't think the media should be in the courtroom pumping out this stuff on television, because I think that distorts the attempt to have justice and to look at the facts. And third, that crappy civilian jury system, which I say is always 12 people off a bus stop, they don't know whether he's telling the truth. They've never studied forensic pathology. They don't know what oh, I've seen that guy. He's got his own show, and they believe anything he says because he says it. Now, in this case, I guess, this is what I have to guess, the evidence, the behavioral evidence of him pointing guns at a lot of people, of Spector, when you take a look at these two, I think for once we got a jury that didn't get fooled, which is amazing. The first jury was a hung jury, but this second jury, I don't think they thought the suicide thing was strong enough that she would go to somebody else's house to kill herself. I think they did believe the gun belonged to him, so she didn't bring it with her to kill herself. And I think because he waved around guns, pointed them at women, and came out of the house and said to the limo driver, I think I shot somebody, I think they almost ignored the blood spatter issue because they couldn't understand it anyway. They couldn't figure out all this stuff. This is a suicide. This would be a homicide. They didn't understand it. So because they didn't understand it, but there was so much behavioral evidence on his part, they decided he had to have done it. But it pisses me off that this whole stuff that they explain how the crime went down, that was suicidal when suicides are actually not that way, and so many things they told which weren't actually true, and not even allowing for possibilities of different body positions, and for her being in a different position, from him being in a different position, from her arms being in a blocking things. So they're making up stuff to fit the defense. The defense says this has to be a suicide, therefore you have to find a way to make it a suicide, and then they hire you and pay you $25,000, $50,000 to make it a suicide, to point out all the possibilities that would support suicide. But you're not allowed to put out the possibilities that support homicide, even if you've got 80% pointing toward homicide and 20% for suicide. You're not allowed to point out the 80%. To me, then you're a fraud in the courtroom, and you're lying, and you're under oath, and I don't understand how this is allowed. But that's the way our court system is set up, so that's the way it goes. All right, I got 87 comments here. All right, so there we are. All right, let me go back and see what you all have to say now. Craziness, huh? Absolutely. I'm just so bothered by it. Benny says, I think the suicide theory is outlandish in every way. It is, and except for the fact it's possible. I mean, it's possible, but everything has to fit together. I mean, if she did bring her own gun, it was clearly her own gun, it would make more sense. If he had said anything about her expressing something, he didn't even come up with a good story about her committing suicide. I would think, if you're about to commit suicide in front of somebody, you're going to say something like, I've had it with men like you. I've had it with the men in this business. All of you just use me, and I never get anywhere. I've had it. Enough of this stuff. I'm going to kill myself, and it's going to be your damn fault. Okay, at least that. He didn't have that. He didn't have any. I don't know why she did it. She was just singing songs and then shot herself. What? With my gun that she got out of my drawer. I mean, his story just sucked. And besides which, he said he shot her, so kind of like that, let's say, I'm not sure what that is about. Okay, I'm going back here because I know you've had some side conversations here that let's see what this is. He said, a friend's father killed himself, a cop. Yeah, that happens. Unfortunately, there's a high suicide rate among police officers. By placing the gun in his mouth, pointing slightly downward. What? That's pretty unusual. I mean, I'm not sure how, you don't see that very often. It's usually this way. That's why they call it swallowing your gun. Because you're not trying to go this way at all. Because you can miss your brain. You don't want to make a mistake on that. You want to hit dead center. And so I'm not sure I understand that. There we go. Yep, eat. That's right. Eat the gun. That's correct. And mine was edible. I have an edible gun. Yes, that is true. Yes, your two front teeth were knocked out, and this is another issue where, regardless of who held the gun in her mouth, she held it or he held it, the same thing actually can happen. Now, there is less, usually with, suicides, you have less damage to the tongue. There was damage to the tongue. Sometimes with homicide, you get more damage to the lips. I was still looking for the autopsy report, and I never could find the dang thing. And so some of these, some things because I couldn't come up with the autopsy report, and I don't know why. Sometimes you all, once I do the show, then you just send me over the link, and I'm like, why didn't I find it? And I put in her name with autopsy, Phil Spector, autopsy, full report, autopsy, and I just haven't come up with it. I don't know why. Maybe I just haven't hit the right link. It's on page 60, or I'm putting the wrong search words in. Not sure. That's a good point, Amanda. Being in a holster and a drawer would point to at least deliberately getting the gun and pointing it at her. Absolutely. Well, he had a history of getting guns and pointing them at people. Not only women, but men. But more women, and more women to the head. And more women. I can't remember if there was one that said he pointed at her mouth. I believe there was one who said that. So anyway, yes, he went and got it, and he pointed it at her. So once you do that, you're in trouble. So the question would be then, did he pull the trigger on purpose? Did he pull the trigger by accident? Or in her own, maybe she actually tried to grab the gun and it went off. That's also possible. We don't know. And we'll never know because there's not a video camera. But what we do know is that they shouldn't be telling a forensic story, which is, as I pointed out, DiMaio's claiming that forensics is totally objective. It's not. When you analyze, you add subjectivity into it, and to me, you should say, well, these are the more likely things to happen, and this is what we've seen in the past. But that's not what was presented in court. What was presented in court was this was a suicide because A, B, C, and D, and A, B, and C, and D weren't even accurate. And that's what pisses me off. It wasn't accurate. And I'm able to prove it here with a banana, and a few other positions. And those positions were never mentioned. I don't remember anything being mentioned about her possibly putting her hands up. And that's why she would have back spatter on the back of her hands. I don't see that anyplace, and I can't find it. And I'm like, wouldn't that be brought up? Did the prosecutor suck slightly? And did their forensic pathologist not really do a great job in trying to dispute? I don't know. I honestly don't know, but it bugs the heck out of me. That's not part of the possibilities. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see. Pat, I write with my left and shoot with my right. Could there be something like that going on here? Okay. I think that's a very good point. Yes, some people are also ambidextrous, and just because he's right-handed and people see him as being right-handed, like playing a guitar like this and writing like this, doesn't mean he can't. By the way, I can shoot very well with my left hand. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure I don't shoot better with the left hand than my right hand, even though I'm right-handed. So who knows? It could be a reason that he could have held it in his left hand. That's a great point, and that again should be a point made in the courtroom. just because he's right-handed doesn't mean he couldn't have held it in his left hand. And as a matter of fact, to some extent, she could have done the same thing. She could have picked up a gun and gone like this, but but DiMaio he wants the two hands on the gun now because he's trying to get the backs of the hands somehow to toward her so that the back spatter will hit the back of her hands. Okay, and people can turn the gun around and put their thumbs there. They can do that, but I'm just thinking he's trying to twist her hands like that. So, yeah, but that's a very good point. Stop with the banana. Hey, I would have used something better if it wasn't for YouTube. Really, I would. That's true. It's a very soft. I was like, man, that's the best I got in my house. That's really sad looking. Yeah, I'll make a drink out of it. I'll do that. I'll make a smoothie. Oh my God. Hi, Christine. Christine finally got here. Late but snuck in. Yeah, you did. I hope you got the at least the part where I did the Reconstruction, and you came after all the technical issues apparently. Oh, that's interesting. The trial judge also had an ethical problem with defense witness Dr. Bodden in this case. Interesting. Yeah, Dr. Bodden's been around a lot too, and the same issue again. The big guns are all hired by the defense. And this is something I pointed out with Brent Turvey, criminal profiler Brent Turvey. He's got a great textbook, which I totally recommend, but he almost always works for the defense as well now, because that's where the money is. And so what you see a lot of times is suddenly somebody who I see how he knows how to think things through, and now I see sometimes I'm like, I think you know better than this, but why are you coming up with this profile or this analysis? Is it because you're working for the defense and you're starting to shift things and you're starting to see it their way because they're paying the bills? I don't know. I can't say people are doing this on purpose. Do they even recognize they're doing this, or just is the money just so big that they do it, or I don't know. I'm sure sometimes they're accurate because maybe the defense is, the guy's actually innocent. And that's what they should be presenting. But this is why I don't like the adversarial system. I would prefer a judge system, which you bring, you'd have let's say you have 7 judges or 5 judges. You have 5 judges who are judges, people like me, a criminal profiler. You could have a forensic pathologist on there and whatever. And then when they present the information, you could have the discussion between the people presenting it. The blood spatter people would present it and discuss it, and then the people who know best would be able to say whether that makes sense or not. And you could stop with all the lying that goes on in court. But this is our system, and people think it works really well. And I watch this stuff, and I'm appalled because I'm thinking they're hired guns, and it shouldn't be hired guns in the courtroom. Oh, Dr. Wecht, well. I mean, and now with the other thing too is with documentaries now, you see the documentaries are highly slanted too. And so what happens is they get hired to support, let's say it's an Innocence Project documentary. They suddenly support that person who's been convicted. They didn't do it. And I'm like, and I'm watching this going, wow, I'm always sort of shocked, and I'm thinking, how much are you being paid for this? And then, generally speaking, documentaries don't pay raw. They don't, but they will pay for that person. Like for me, they can replace me. I'm a profiler. They can get another profiler, another detective. They can get somebody else to replace me. I don't have that, but somebody like one of these top forensic pathologists, like Dr. Lee, I mean, they're going to pay him a lot of money to do that. So me, they make, I'm like, okay, I'm not even showing up for that money. And I've got to fight for the money to make it worthwhile. And I'm still getting paid low. I'm not getting paid greatly. I'm just covering what I think is tolerable. But for those guys, I'm going to say they get 10 times what I get paid, or maybe more. And so, I mean, they're like, okay, I can do this. And I'm thinking, but how do you not know that's not true, what you're saying? So frustrating. So very frustrating. I don't know about Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee has had his, he just supported this too. Dr. Lee just said she committed suicide. That's what his book says. He supported exactly what happened in court and says absolutely he didn't do it. And I'm like, You are ignoring 80% of the evidence and you're distorting the other 20%. How is this possible for a person who's supposed to be an analyst and not supposed to have, just supposed to be not on anybody's side except justice, except you got paid $50,000 to be on that side? That side? Oh, no, that side. Depending on what side. But, you're not being paid, And that's true, too. Denny says the expert defense witnesses did the same in the Casey Anthony case. Yeah, it was horrific. I say I'm always blown away when I see this kind of thing. And, demos out a lot. Well, it's, this Doreen says, Pat Brown, criminal profile, an expert at YouTube demonstrations. And of course, this is a pretty pitiful one considering the circumstances under which I'm working. But, sometimes even the simplest thing, if you looked at my Greg Whitman video about the two brothers, one killing the other brother, and I did the how long does it take to stab somebody, whatever it was, 120 times or whatever it was, I can't remember. And I set the timer and then ran around the living room just pretending I was stabbing somebody else. And I did it in like under a minute. It was like 40 seconds or something, really crazy. And but when I did that, people got to see that is really the way it works. Not fancy, but it proves something. And so I try to show how sometimes you don't need to be, I am not a blood spatter expert, so I'm not going to say, well, the centimeters that the blood trajectory would take would be 12. That's in that book, I can look at it in the book. I can't do that. I'm not doing mathematical things and putting strings out, and measuring every angle and all that fancy stuff. I'm just showing how if you use some logic, you can see certain things are not as they seem, or certain things could be a different way, just by simple logic. And that's what I think is missing, sadly, because a lot of times when they bring the experts in, they make claims, and there's no proof of their claims. And so you talk, especially when you talk about forensic pathology, people think that's science, but when their analysis is not necessarily always scientific, it's often just opinion and statistical and whatever the defense wants them to say. So they're not proving anything. As a matter of fact, I don't see much evidence that they proved anything that they said on the defense side at all. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. They're like, oh, this is what I think it is. And I'm an important person, and I'm an important forensic pathologist, so you should believe me. And I just find that really sad. Thumbs up for the banana demo. And I'm not sure I know some of these people. Dr. Garofalo, I'm not sure. I remember who Dr. Garofalo is. I'm not sure about that. That's a good point. Red Rum, they don't practice what they preach, and I think that is true sometimes. And Dr. Curry. Who's Dr. Curry? Expert Dr. Curry. I'm going to have to look up who Dr. Curry is. I've never heard of Dr. Curry. I don't know. Is it he or she? Who is that? Her name wrong. The other one is Garavaglia? Okay, I can't pronounce it. Garavaglia? I don't know, and I don't know who Dr. Curry is. Is this a prosecution witness or a defense witness? Or both. As an expert for the defense, prosecution, somebody who will do both, but only if it's correct. I'm not familiar, so I don't know. A lot of times I found that, for Johnny Depp, Dr. Curry what? We're talking about Dr. Curry's on the Johnny Depp thing? Okay, Dr. G. Oh, she's Dr. G with her own television program. I'm not familiar with it at all. I don't know. But this is what's interesting. I'll have to look at some of these because I've a lot of times if the case is something everybody's pretty sure about, then they can discuss things, and it always sounds good. Almost always sounds good, unless it's a questionable case, you see, because then you can explain things and it makes sense. The problem what happens in the court, and that's where suddenly those clever descriptions and assuredness seem to sort of vanish, because they don't match what you want to present in court, and that becomes an issue. Amanda, funny, I'm glad you asked that. And no, normally what you have is the bullet would help determine the body position. And now I want to Google that again, because I was actually trying to Google that earlier, and that's why I was trying to get the autopsy report and the crime scene report, and I was not coming up with it. I don't know that it exited her head, and that's what I kept thinking. The reason they're not talking about that, because, if she's sitting in the chair, right, and she's going like this, and the exit's out here, then you should see blood spatter on the wall behind her. Or if her head were if he all of a sudden went like this and shot down, the blood spatter would go, the exit wound would be down here, come out, down lower. It would be the same trajectory, but the head position would change where the blood was behind her if she was sitting in the chair. Now, he could, just because somebody's head is in a position like this later, doesn't mean that's where it was shot, because the head can flop, or person can push your head, or whatever. Or she could have been standing up, and then you would have it maybe exiting into the wall. You'd see how, actually the bullet would be in the wall, and then you have blood on the wall. I didn't see any of that, so I'm thinking it did not leave her head, and that's. Let me put in her name and put the exit wound, and I don't know if I forgot to put that in when I was searching around exit wound. Let's see. What the heck? Why do I not see? See, this is what I couldn't come up with. I don't see anything that said there was an exit wound. I don't even see anything that says there wasn't an exit wound. It just says a fatal gunshot wound. It talks about her tongue. It talks about the trajectory. I don't see anything about an exit wound or non-exit wound. Isn't that single bullet wound to the head? That's all I see, single bullet wound to the head through the roof of her mouth. If you all find it, put it in the comments below, because it was driving me crazy because I couldn't find it. And that's also true. There was a question, Amanda, whether she could have literally been any place. I mean, he could have moved her. It's possible. She could have been lying on lying on the floor. She could have been lying on a bed. She could have been she could have been on the couch, and he picked her up and moved her. There is some blood going down the chair, so I think she was probably either standing in front of the chair or sitting in the chair. And of course the question could be whether he could have come at her. She was trying to leave. He could have pushed her back. He could have forced her into the chair. Or he could have shot her and had her fall into the chair. But again, and her purse was kind of weirdly tangled up. So there is sort of a theory that there could have been a fight, and then she went into the chair at some point being shot. But I can't, I'd like to know about the exit wound. Well, that's what it looks like, but they don't clearly say it. I mean, I can't find the proper autopsy report, which normally says, you have one entrance wound, no exit wound, and then But yeah, yes, he was checked for gunshot residue. She had some, he did not, on his hands. But remember, I believe he washed it off. And she would have it because, first of all, her hands, if she was trying to stop him from shooting, the gunshot residue would be on her hands. Also, if he came back and if he took the gun and put it in her hands, let's say he even shot her, and then he touched the gun into her hands, went away, washed it off, and came back and dropped it on the floor. Again, she would have it on her. And if he washed his hands, he wouldn't have it on him. So this is where it gets a little complicated. So then you have to ask, does any of the other information, like his confession, he confessed more than once, mind you. He confessed to the limo driver, he confessed to him, I think I shot somebody. You don't think he shot somebody when the person shot themselves. That's a pretty straightforward statement. Then he tells the police he shot her and it was an accident. That's more than one confession. And it's his gun in his house. So I think that, there are those questions we're going to have. There was clearly, in my opinion, some disturbance of the crime scene, because if he was 6 feet back, why is there a wet diaper with her blood on it in the bathroom? Where does that come from? I mean, if he's 6 feet back, he's got almost nothing but a little bit of the blowback on him, and it's really why does he have that on him? He didn't say he went up and touched her body. He didn't explain he was doing anything to her. What was he doing? So that's, yeah. And so I think that's the problem, that his story didn't hold water to the police. It didn't hold water in the court. And the forensics, in spite of the fact they tried to fit it onto her committing suicide, didn't work really well, especially because it's his gun. And so she did not bring that gun with her. So you just literally would have to believe, on the way out, she rifled his drawer. Instead of finding money, she found a gun and decided to kill herself right then and there. Crazy. Just crazy. Yes, she did have it on her hands again. All you have to do is put your hands up and you've got GSR on you. And if somebody puts a gun in your hand, it also gives you GSR. So, and it's very easy to get GSR in your hands. Very easy. There are times when there shouldn't be any GSR on you. And people will claim that, I believe that was in the, what am I thinking of? The Jill Dando case, where I personally think they did get the right guy, and he had GSR, I think it was in his pocket. That claim is somebody might have been on a bus with him who had been firing guns at the range and bumped into him, and the GSR transferred. So you get people who will claim all over the place that a person who shouldn't have GSR on them got GSR from, I don't know, a bat flying through the room, a bat that landed on a gun someplace else and came to you, But in this case, where she's actually would put up her hands and the guy could put the gun in her hands, that suddenly GSR means she shot the gun, and it doesn't. So, yeah, it's crazy. But yes, she did have GSR. There we go. That's correct. And that's, by the way, that's the prosecutor. Very good, Elisa. There are two ways to look at it. It implies the person could have been holding a weapon at the time of discharge or could be in the vicinity. That is correct. Yep, that is absolutely correct. Was that in Barry George's pocket? Yeah. And but I've seen that explained away. Which normally we don't have GSR on us in our pockets. And he had blood in his pocket, so you kind of wonder where that gun went. You know what I mean? It's like, why would you have blood in your pocket? Your pants pocket. It's like, unless you at some point had that gun and put it in your pocket. I mean, yeah, very interesting. Amanda says, I see a lot of guilty say, I think or I may have. Is that normally indicative of guilt or an accident? There's a couple of possibilities. One is that the person wasn't totally cognizant of what was happening at the time, like you're drunk off your butt, and there was some kind of confrontation and confusion, and the gun went off, and you don't know if you did it or you didn't. I think I may have, and it may be. I personally think he did not intentionally kill her. I do not believe that at all. I don't think it was murder one. I think he probably did what he did with the rest of the women, came out and said, you all women are all like that. Like to show his, whatever he liked to show, his manliness, and look, you all are out to get me type of thing. And just showing off and trying to spook her and maybe convince her to stay in some weird way, and got too close to her. She tried to defend herself. She freaked out. He freaked out. He accidentally pulled the trigger when maybe she grabbed the front of the gun and grabbed the gun, and then instead of pulling, he pushed. Who knows? And so he says, I think I killed her. because he didn't mean to do that, but he thinks that's exactly what happened. You're driving down the road and you look down at your phone and there's an accident and you say, I think I caused an accident. It could actually be that you didn't cause the accident. Maybe the other person caused the accident, but because you were looking down, you don't know. So I think I did. So yeah, I think it tends to be either two things. Either you did something wrong and you did something wrong, but it wasn't necessarily on purpose. And the other one is you really don't know what happened because you were not maybe altogether there. I think so, Carrie. The statement to the limo driver sounds like an excited utterance, which is particularly credible. Absolutely. I mean, that's the first thing he said, and he's got the gun in his hand, too. Now, think about this. I forgot to even talk about this. She shoots herself in the mouth. The gun falls to the ground. Why would he pick it up? What in the world why would he pick up the gun? I completely forgot to mention that part. And I don't even know if they mentioned it in the trial. Somebody shot themselves with a gun and it slides to the floor, the last thing I'm going to do is touch that gun. I'm going to back right out of there. I'm not going to get anywhere near that gun. He's got it in his hand. And then it ends up back by her foot. See, there's that whole thing. And then now they're going to say what? The driver didn't speak perfect English, but he also couldn't see straight. He couldn't see that the guy was standing there with a gun in his hand saying, I think I killed somebody. This is also true, Lisa. Testimony. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I keep not wanting to do it. I want to say Pena because that's Spanish, but I don't know if that's the pronunciation. Clarkson had a bruised tongue, indicating a gun was forced in her mouth. Yes and no. And this had to be fair about that. Yes and no. The bruised tongue could be from a gun being forced. It could also be from just the fact that when she shot, the gun did this. But there's also damage to the tongue. It was like cut, and that's more homicidal again, because if you're doing suicide, you get the tongue out of the way. If you're doing homicide, the tongue gets in the way. See how that works? So that's more likely that it was homicidal for that reason. The bruising tongue, but more damage to the tongue than just the bruising. Oh, that's terrible. I guess you didn't tip the limo driver. Yeah, pretty much not. If she shot herself, that would have been the first thing he would say to the driver, probably. Yeah, because it would be so bizarre that some girl you just met grab your gun and shoot herself. Yeah. I mean, he would probably come out. This is what I would think would happen. So for whatever reason, she's mucking around in your drawer, and you come out and you go, "What are you doing with my gun?" And she's like, I need your gun because life is terrible and I'm done with it. I'm going to kill myself. And then she falls to the ground or into the chair, and you go, "Holy crap!" You run out of the house toward the driver with her hands in the air, with no blood on them, and you're freaking out, going, "Oh my God! She just killed herself. She got my gun out of the drawer. I don't know what she was going through my drawer. She got my gun. She just killed herself in there. Call the police. I'll call an ambulance. I don't know what to do. She's just, yeah, that's what I'd be doing." See, his behaviors were completely wrong. He was stunned. He had a behavior of being stunned because he couldn't believe it happened. That I think I killed somebody. And so I don't think he's a murderer in that sense. And, I don't think he wanted this girl dead. I don't think he wanted that at all. I think he said it was the worst thing he ever saw in his life. I think it's true. I think after she was shot, he was horrified. But then once the the driver went off to call to get help, he realized he was in trouble, so he tried to stage the thing, thinking maybe I can save myself. And then when the police came, he still babbled the wrong thing, told them the truth, and then he took it back and said, no, she killed herself. So, and then when he had time to think, he could get together a really good defense team because he's got a whole lot of money, hoping that defense team would get him off. Because in his mind, probably, it was the worst thing he ever saw, but it was an accident, and he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison for an accident. Kind of like somebody who is a drunk driver. A person goes out and has a great evening, and they're driving home, and they shouldn't be in the car, but they are, and they cross that line, and they kill somebody, and it was the worst thing that they ever saw. It's the worst thing that could have ever happened. They feel horrible about it. They know they're responsible. Should they go to prison for 30 years because they made a stupid choice that night that ended up with somebody's death when they didn't mean to kill anybody? Did he not mean to actually hurt her? He was just being his crazy self, doing his crazy stuff, which he shouldn't be doing with a gun, mind you. You're responsible. It's you killed her, But I see where he could say, oh my God, I didn't mean to do it. That wasn't my intention. I can't believe it happened. And, and then at that point, I think he might think, if I could just save myself at this point, because she's already dead, so hopefully I can just save myself and not have to die in prison, which he did die in prison. So, Amanda says, if I had a Tinder date come over and fly into a depressed rant and shoot himself with my gun, I'd be like, what? WTF was that? Try not to have a Tinder date. That's the first thing you want to avoid. Oh, is that right? Oh, thank you. Lisa is a very good researcher. This is why I like this group, because you all come up with really good stuff. And as I point out many times, somebody says, why don't you know this? I'm like, because no one's hired me to spend 100 hours doing research. I'm doing YouTube. I'm trying to do education. I'm trying to keep my YouTube channel alive, much less I'm going to spend 100 hours trying to do one case. The coroner's report is available for $59. Holy crap. Usually they're free online. Wow. Haha, not actually on Tinder. I'm glad to hear that. Tinder has had a pretty kind of a high homicide rate, It's a little scary because there's not a lot of good research into who you're getting stuck with when you're hooking up with somebody on Tinder. And if you just go for coffee, usually that's not exactly what they want. But wow, $59. Yeah, I have limits to how much I can spend doing the show. I bought Lee's book, so I spent money on that. And the rest of the stories, I never even heard of them, so I think Phil Spector might be the only worthwhile thing in it. And mostly all he was saying was, you keep calling us, making bad names at us, calling us hired guns. And I'm like, okay, I just wasted $12, but so be it. Okay, so anyway, I think that's it. Unless you have any more after the Tinder swindler. Oh my goodness. But anyway, so I thought this was turned out to be a really interesting case because of the forensic issues. And I'm kind of still a little shocked that this was not, so many of these issues weren't even brought up. And, I'm like, why would you not talk about these other possibilities and other ways for the holding of the gun, the head shape, the issue of homicide versus suicide, and so many things, and the hands like this to get the back spatter on them. Why is this not mentioned? I mean, it seems pretty basic to me, because when I look at a case, I go, okay, what are the other possibilities? Because I want to make sure that I'm not missing something. Like when I started looking at the thing about the gun going shooting like this, I'm like, well, but you put your finger here and you shoot like this, that's where you see where it goes, but you could just keep turning your head in all the directions and you still get the same angle. So it's like, how can a forensic pathologist not say that her head could have been in any one of these angles? He didn't have to be sitting on the floor shooting up at her. I mean, what kind of crap is that? It just blows my mind. Totally blows my mind. But that's what I'm hoping to teach here, on YouTube, to get across more educational information like that. So in the future, that people can learn and then do better jobs and not be hired by the defense. You can't have your banana and eat it. Well, oh my God. Yeah, Spector is loaded. Well, that's the thing. I mean, he had a ton of money to be able to afford the best defense team. So. No, no, we don't need the report. I mean, this show again is educational. We're not here to solve a crime. It's already been solved. The prosecution was successful. The jury found him guilty the second time around, and all the forensic pathologists who testified got their big bucks, and they get to write books about it and say they're still right. And my purpose here is to just bring a little reality to the whole situation, and and help people understand. That's all. It's about understanding. So, too bad these ladies didn't report his gun waving around tendencies. Sounds like he should have had his guns removed. Well, that's a good point, because that is not proper handling of a weapon. That is a threat. That is an actual threat. That is a crime. Pointing a gun at somebody and threatening them is a crime. So yeah, but again, it was Phil Spector. So most of the women, the problem I think they had was he was that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing. And so he had that side of him, which I really enjoyed. His sense of humor, his brilliance, his ability to, write songs and produce, and he did incredible things. They saw that side, and then they saw this crazy man. And they're just like, man, that guy he just flipped out and went crazy. And then he let them go. So then they're like, wow, I just won't date him again. That's the way they thought. As opposed to, I should go to the police and report this because it was a threat. Because he's also Phil Spector, and he's got a huge amount of money, and it is their word against his, right? So he would go, I didn't do that. She's exaggerating. I took the gun out too because I heard a prowler, and she thought I was pointing it at her. Yeah, there you go. So, can you point a banana and say, well, I'll kill you? Well, I would think if you fall for this, look at this banana. And you risk the psych ward. Oh, isn't that true? Red Rum says, I think they did report him waving guns around. Was that after he was arrested, or who did they report that to? To the police, or just make commentary? I mean, I don't know which one it was. What would a professional jury have thought? A different outcome? No, I think a professional jury in this case. Now, you look at this, and it's a good question, Molly, because you say, okay, well, if Vincent DiMaio and Werner Spitz and Henry Lee and who else you said was involved in this one? We got so many of them. He had a big team. There are 3 forensic pathologists who all agree. The 3 top professional forensic pathologists all agree. And then there's Pat Brown, who disagrees with the 3 top professional pathologists in this case, forensic pathologists. So either Pat Brown has no business even speaking up, because who the hell is she in comparison to these guys? Because she's not a forensic pathologist. So let's say we were all on that professional jury. Would those 3 guys have found him innocent and I found him guilty? Would that be what happened? Okay? Or because they're not being paid by the defense, they don't come up with the suicide theory the same way. Would they then say a lot of what I just said and say, well, there's different head positions, she could have put her hands up? Would they then do that because they weren't being paid for either side? Because they were the jury at that point, and there's no reason to go one way or the other on this. I wanted to point out one more thing, and this is very, very true, and I think I forgot to put it up here. This is absolutely true, and just because it's true, there we go. Oh yes, I don't think I said this, did I? Anyway, people think the most difficult cases are homicides, said DiMaio, a retired chief medical examiner who has provided expert testimony in several court cases. That's not true. It's suicide. People do not want to accept suicides. They will try to make suicides homicides. I 100% agree with him. Because I say this all the time. Almost every case I've ever had that was a suicide, that was determined to be a suicide by the police, was a suicide. But I'm not saying it always is true, because I know one case which absolutely it's not true, and there's another one which I think is not true. I have 2 or 3 cases I've come across which I believe it was truly a homicide when it was determined to be a suicide. Most of the time, the person did commit suicide, and the family and whomever else doesn't want to believe it. That doesn't mean this was a suicide. And of all the suicides I've seen, this is not how they go down. So we're seeing an anomaly here anyway. So maybe the anomaly is that it's not a suicide. So I don't think that was appropriate as a proof of suicide. Just because most of the time it is a suicide doesn't mean this is a suicide. So no, we don't need the report, because it's really probably going to tell us no more than we already know, and it is, again, it's not going to serve a purpose, at this point in time. So no, if it were an unsolved case, again, I'm not here to solve cases, and so yeah, I'm not here to solve cases. I'm not a vigilante group here. Like we have on many other YouTube channels where they all get together and put their money out to then prove some poor schmuck who didn't do it is guilty. I don't want to go there. This is educational. So, but thank you, Carrie, for the concept. But no, it's also, it's not going to tell us any more than we basically know. Most of what's in the, there are a few bruises on her body. Except for the fact they didn't talk about the exit wound or non-exit wound, we basically know what happened in her face. And again, it's I find it more leaning toward homicide than I do toward suicide in the way the damage she had in her face and the position she didn't go up, that was straight back. I find it more homicidal than I find it suicidal. And that's just the forensics of that one issue, just of the actual what happened to her head, and then we have the blood spatter issues, and then we have all the behavioral issues. So you put them all together, and you come up with a totality of evidence. And the totality of evidence this time, the second jury got it right, in my opinion. And it's interesting because they had such big guns in there. I am surprised that they didn't fall for them the second time, but the first time apparently they did. So yeah. All right, so that's it for today. I hope that the earlier problems don't completely destroy this broadcast for everybody else. I want them to be able to go forward and be able to see the rest of the video with the reconstruction part of it. And so I'll see this when we're finished here. I'll see this. So all you people in the future who are coming to, if you're still here to see the video, I'm glad you got through the bad part. That apparently, I think it was the internet went down, and I think it just distorted things. So I may have to put a little thing there that says jump to this, jump to this, and see the rest of the show. So such as it is. So frustrating. But anyway. Oh, yes, an apprentice profiler, not a detective. I like that concept. Really? It's all good from the beginning. Well, no, I don't know, because it was too loud, and somebody said it was blurry, and I looked like crap, so I don't know. I'm going to see it later and say, oh, no. So frustrating. The technical stuff just drives me crazy. But again, it's live, and when you do live, it doesn't matter how much you do that's correct. When I sat down today, everything was perfect. But, somehow the internet just went down. So, I mean, luckily I still had at least Wi-Fi, but, then you start getting that jaggedy stuff. But anyway, if you're still here, folks, and you still haven't liked the video or join the channel here by being a subscriber, please do that. And also there's books below that I've written, and you can always click on those and support the channel with those. So Anna keeps saying it's not your fault. Everybody else said they had problems too. So anyway, no worries. No worries. I mean, that's why I do lots of shows. So if one screws up, we have more. But I thought this was such an interesting case. I do hope that it came out okay. So, well, thank you very much, guys. You're wonderful. You're all great in the chat room here, and you brought in lots of interesting information. Yes, I enjoy my fellow chatters too, and that's why you're patrons, and that's why I have patron-only chats, because, yeah. But everybody else, if you're not a patron, you can always join and become one and join in the chat rooms, or you can just comment below, and I always try to answer the comments until they get too many, and then I can't do it anymore. But I do try to respond in the comment section as well if you're not part of the chat room. So I enjoy everybody, all my subscribers, and even my non-subscribers who comment below. I find that interesting, and sometimes you come up with something I've never heard of before, or some interesting fact about the case, which is just like, wow, that's cool, because more heads, more information, not just me. So, but it was great. Yes, that is true. Great comments from our members. Yay. I just want to say one more thing. That's why I do like doing the lives, because it's so much, when you're just talking into a camera, it's kind of dead feeling, you just don't have that input. And I really do enjoy my patrons. I really do. You're all really great, and it makes my day. It makes a much more fun day in this rainy, cold, crappy day in Maryland. Here with you guys, I feel like I'm at a party, so it's kind of nice. So anyway, I'm glad you're all here, and I am. There is going to be a call-in on Tuesday. It's going to be in the evening this time. I'm going to send out an email to those who are my level 5 people who can do the call-in. I'm going to ask you for what you want to talk about, specific things you're really interested in, and people really like listening to the call-ins, and so that's pretty cool. I'm like, people think it's fun, and I like getting to hear voices. So, not that I don't hear voices sometimes, but your voices. Not those other ones. They scare me. Anyway, so I'll see you this week and a few other things that we're doing, the call-in and the hangout, and then next Sunday. What case, I'm not sure, but and I'm trying to end my show again. I can't, for some reason lately, I put so many overlays in, then I can't get back to my video clips, which is why I try to say goodbye. Like, goodbye.